Welcome back. The deaf community has called on the government to expedite the inclusion of sign language as one of the country's official languages. This emerged at the official launch of the South African Sign Language Charter in Pretoria. This also marks 62 years of the celebration of International Month for the Deaf as declared by the World Federation of the Deaf. The charter aims to remove barriers in order to enable the deaf community equitable access to information. Now, to talk to us about the charter, we joined via Zoom by Nikiwe Matebula, Acting Executive Head of Languages at PanSALB. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, sir.
Just give us a summation of the objectives of the charter. What is it all about and what it wants to achieve?
Okay. The South African Sign Language Charter was developed by one of the structures of PanSALB. The structure of PanSALB is called the South African Sign Language National Language Board. South African Sign Language National Language Body identified a need to come up with a charter, which was prompted by in public where you would see there would be interpreters that would be fake or interpreters that are not competent in South African Sign Language. Then they are given a platform to interpret services for the deaf. Then the South African Sign Language NLB identified a need to say justice is not served, it's discrimination, it's not inclusion for the deaf because you get an interpreter who does not deliver a message as required. And as such, the deaf were disadvantaged, hence the establishment of the charter. The charter has 9 pledges that speaks on all issues of the deaf pertaining South African Sign Language.
So how is the society reacting and, of course, accommodating deaf people in as far as sign language is concerned? Is it something that is overlooked?
It's very much overlooked. You can even say to an extent that you can say the deaf are abused because they don't receive services like all of us. We can start by looking at in government departments, it's difficult for them to access information. You go to the courts, it's difficult for them to have South African Sign Language interpreters at times. South African police services, when they report their cases, it's a challenge as well. You go to a local level, municipalities, they're not consulted on issues affecting them. We hold imbizos, we hold workshops, we hold lekotas, you name it. But we don't establish as to whether we have the deaf people that we can invite in these services. I can also make an example. It's a Deaf Awareness Month. It's for the deaf. They always say their motto is nothing about us without us. Yet even in our interviews, because of the way our mind is wired as a society, you get hearing people still speaking on the issues of the deaf. We have a board member who is deaf. Such people could be invited to these interviews. We have South African Sign Language NLB members. We've got deaf associations, the Deaf Federation of South Africa, that is DEFSA. We've got SANDA, South African National Deaf Association. They've got very intelligent, articulate deaf people who can take such interviews. So it's just a matter of us, society, having to be aware, having to ensure that we have workshops. Some are conducted by PanSALB to raise awareness. However, society as well has to want to be actively involved to acknowledge that we have deaf people in our society. They are part of us, and 90% of deaf people are born out of hearing people. So it's not like it's only deaf people who give birth to deaf people. Most of the parents of deaf children are hearing parents. And as such, it's very important for us to acknowledge them as members of our society, as children in our society, and ensure that in all aspects of life they are accommodated. We still get television programs that have no interpreters at all. You've got television programs that have no interpreters at all. You get radio stations where people would ask you, how do I invite a deaf person? You invite a deaf person, you ensure that a deaf person has a South African Sign Language interpreter, and then they can give you whatever information that you want to know about South African Sign Language. So it's very important for our society to be aware. Hence, the month of September is declared the Deaf Awareness Month to say we have to be aware of all these issues, and we have to acknowledge that our deaf society is really excluded in participating in our society. It's excluded to participate in government. We have also challenges in education where you find there are no qualified teachers sometimes. who know South African Sign Language and can teach these languages. So we are saying even the deaf should be employed in our places of work to ensure that they receive services in their languages.
So now, because I mean, like, admittedly, South Africa has been exposed to the deaf and sign language, but why has it taken a long time for it to be official as the 12th language of the country?
You must remember the issue of languages emanates from the Constitution. We have the Constitution of South Africa that speaks of 11 official languages, and then it says for South African Sign Language, the Khoi, Nama, and San languages, these languages still have to be developed. So it emanates from the Constitution. So for it to be the 12th official language, it has to be amended from the Constitution. However, there have been talks, and then you will also perhaps might have noticed that during the launch of the charter that took place yesterday, most of the deaf people were saying and advocating in support of PanSALB to say it should be the 12th official language. So the issue is that also to amend the Constitution is not something that you can do overnight. However, the PENN South African Language Board has been actively involved. The Deaf Federation of South Africa, the South African National Deaf Association, and all deaf people have been taking it upon themselves to ensure that they lobby that the language becomes the 12th official language. So it's just a matter of amending the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa.
Right. So, gauging the level of interest of the members of the public in learning sign language, what is it that PanSALB can do to make people interested, especially through the awareness campaigns that you have embarked on?
Yes, we are definitely going to embark on more campaigns, because yesterday it was just the beginning where we had the launch of the charter. So we will have workshops where we will ensure that members of society are mostly informed and know exactly what the contents of the South African Sign Language Charter are. So those contents will guide them to know when we say something is South African Sign Language, what is South African Sign Language? It is a language like any other language. And then I noticed also during COVID-19, many people were saying, we see a white person interpreting when, let's say, someone is speaking in an African language. Do you have a sign language in English? Do you have sign language in Xhosa? We only have one South African Sign Language. So such questions show you that people still don't understand what sign language is, how it works. It's a language of deaf people. The only difference between South African Sign Language and our language is that ours is spoken, whereas for South African Sign Language, you use gestures, hand gestures, and then you use your facial expression. That's the only difference. Other than that, South African Sign Language is like any other language. So that is what we're trying to teach society through some of our campaigns, that there has to be training for front staff liners who work with deaf people to ensure that they receive services in their languages, and to understand that even when they use interpreters, there has to be trained professional South African Sign Language interpreters. And that's where the deaf have to be consulted through the Deaf Association.
All right. Thank you very much for making time to speak to us.
Thank you, sir.
Right, that's Nikiwe Matebula, who is the Chief Executive at PanSALB, talking to us about Deaf Awareness Month. Let's take a break.